So today we're going to be taking a look at Data Hub and querying data. One of the things that we want to convey is that if you're used to querying data using any other SQL tool, it's very simple. What Data Hub provides is access to your data in a very quick way that maybe you're not used to. So we're going to be looking at things like, how do I get data from real-time CDC and compare that to a raw file and sort of build a picture of where my data was at that exact moment. We're going to take a look at querying data across different data sets, so joining things like Scimitar with your Banno data to be able to see how many members you have and how many are actually engaged with Banno. And we're going to take a look at a couple of different things. So I'm Jeremey Schrack. I'm a software engineering manager over the Data Hub team, as well as Jack Henry Insights. And this with me is Brad Mintun.
Go ahead. Okay, so we're going to start with the Data Hub overview. We've talked about this for a couple of years now, so most of you have probably seen this or heard about this. But before we get into the actual act of how we do queries, how we execute on this, and some of the common patterns that we've heard about, just want to refresh what we're talking about here. Data Hub is essentially Jack Henry's consolidated data strategy. Over the history of time at Jack Henry, we've had hundreds of different products and different solutions who've all had different data strategies and different access patterns for those data elements. And it's always been on the consumers, the fintechs, to solve the problems of how to get these things together, which is a lot like herding cats. So we kind of figured that this was our cats to herd, and so we came up with Data Hub as a strategy. Effectively, what you're looking at in terms of what the actuality of Data Hub is this main section right in here. Don't want to cross the line. It's essentially a Google Cloud project that we own and operate. Inside it has two main technology pieces. First is BigQuery, the second is PubSub. And in that, what we do is we create a number of ingestion paths and pipelines for those. Those are standardized and normalized across all the different products that we support. And they're operationalized in the sense that we have full observability on them, we have incident management on them, we have all of the reporting and monitoring that you'd expect from a tier 1 application. All of that aggregates the data into a single shared repository across all of our tenants. And then from there, what we do is work with our consumers to give access to the data that they need to have, right? So oftentimes we're talking to a financial institution. They want access to their core data and their treasury data and their digital data, right? And so we create a pattern to essentially provide a view to that or egress that data to them. There's a number of patterns that we support. The most common one is if they have a Google Cloud project of their own. That's a very simple pattern for us. We can actually take an identity from them and create a direct view into the BigQuery instance or the PubSub topics themselves, and they get a copy of that data in a read-only format. So they can then take and do whatever work they need to do on that data in that pattern. We also have more, and I won't steal your thunder, about how we can egress that out to different stores. So at the end of the day, what we want to make sure happens is the data that's in the system goes out to ultimately meet the consumers where they need it to be. So if you're an Azure customer or Snowflake customer, or you have your data warehouse on premise, like ultimately that's the direction, right? We want to land that data for you where that data is needed. So at a high level, that's really what we're talking about today. As you'll see, what we've done is we've tried to consolidate this across all these pipelines. We support all of the software solutions at Jack Henry. We're working to build those out. There is conversations to bring in some broader third-party data elements in the future. I'm not allowed to talk about those because Chad will slap my hand really hard. But the intention is essentially this becomes your single-stop shop for all of your data needs.
So what data sets do we have available? Well, we've got about 6, 7 of them available.
Just for the record, those are groans, not laughs.
I understand.
Just want to make sure
exactly
you know that.
What I was looking for. So first of all, we have Banno available, and within the Banno data set, we've got things like the ads reporting, Banno conversations, Banno history. We've got the operations and transactional data, including very soon we'll have the transfers data as well. We've got Jack Henry Wires history. This includes data collected by the Jack Henry Wires product, wire ID, employee user ID, those types of things. Next, we have an aggregated data set that's calculated monthly currently from the payments team, which includes PayCenter, Incenta, Payrails, and others. We are working with them over the course of the next month and a half to get them set up so that they're doing a continuous change data capture into Data Hub, so that'll be changing in the near future. We've got sanction screening. Available now is treasury management. We're really excited about that one. So you can take a look at your treasury management data and aggregate that against your Banno data and draw some conclusions. The Banno usage data, this is an analytics type of data that tells you what your users are doing when they're interacting with Banno, what pages are they visiting, how long are they spending on those pages, that kind of stuff. We have Silver Lake currently available, and this includes a weekly extract as well as change data capture. So each week we pull a batch from Silver Lake to kind of get a picture of what that database looked like, and then moment by moment, second by second, we're capturing data.
Before you go on, one thing I didn't say, and I think you just highlighted it right there, is the goal with the Data Hub project is to get you as close to real-time data as possible. Some cases that's not very, very sustainable. Other cases we're like with the Banno data sets and the treasury data sets, those are effectively real time today. So with Silver Lake in the core right there, essentially what we try and do is create two pipelines. The first one is a full set, which that means is every record and every row from every table into Data Hub. And then it's augmented with a real-time stream for any change records that are occurring as they happen in the system. And we'll touch a little bit more about how you use that in a few slides. But ultimately, what we want to get to is real-time data so that you can have access to that data for whatever you're building, whatever you're using it for, as quickly as you need it.
So you have a Google project, and you're working with Jack Henry. How do you add a data set? What we're trying to accomplish with all of the connectors that we're building out is we retain the storage, you come to us, you do your queries against that using compute in your project. The first service that we're able to offer that with, though, is Google. They have a tool called Analytics Hub that we're able to share.
Actually called sharing, not Analytics Hub anymore. They changed it. Lucas is here, he'll be mad.
Okay, so anyhow. We're able to share that data out with you. Just need your project ID and a service account that you want us to share that with. And then subscribing to that data set is very simple. So we're going to walk through that. That'll be our first demo.
Sharing.
Going back, we do have a guide out on Jack Henry Dev. I know that's kind of small, but on Jack Henry Dev, we do have instructions on how to access the sharing. So first you go into BigQuery and then you go to sharing, Analytics Hub, and you click that. And then you come to a screen like this. You click on the search listing button there at the top that's highlighted. Search for the data set that you want, check the private box, and then the list of Jack Henry data sets that we've shared with you will pull up. You click the one that you want. In this case, we wanted the Scimitar data set. You click the link to open it, and then click the subscribe button. The last thing you do is within your project, maybe you want to give that a name that's different from what we're sharing it as. That allows you to be able to define that, and then also be able to specify the project within your GCP environment that you want that saved to. And that's it. And then you go into the Data Hub Studio, expand your data sets, and there it is.
So from here, really it becomes a question, and this is probably more important to this audience, about how do we start beginning to use that data? I think the first thing we want to talk about is what do we look like from a real-time perspective, right? Yeah. You said weekly batches, so that happens over the weekend, but in the meantime, things are happening in my institution. How do I see that?
Great question.
I know.
How do we time hop? So basically what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to merge that CDC data with the weekly snapshot to get that single source of truth. So for the data nerds in this room, that means if I want to know what happened on February 12th, 2022, I can get that exact moment in time from BigQuery. Here's the query that you do that with. So we combine the two tables, the first one being the raw. We're looking at the DD mass table here. Some things to note about the BigQuery syntax. The first dot is your project. Second is the data set name. And the third is your table. That's going to be really important as we go through some more of the demo. Within within BigQuery. The most efficient way to do this is to combine things into an array using your primary key and then taking the first one. Well, first we have to sort by timestamp and then taking the first item from that. This is the most efficient way to get that most recent edit. And then at the bottom, we're filtering out anything that's not an update or an insert. So if you have deleted records, of course, you don't want to see that in your snapshot because it didn't exist.
One thing I'll point out up here, if you look at the table names, you'll note the naming convention on there. You see ddmass_raw. That is the batch process that runs on the weekend. The ddmass_cdc, it's not pure CDC in this case. We do have some of those that are pure CDC, but that's the change records. So those are the full record of the table being streamed in real time. So those are the two tables that are being used in this example.
If you're familiar with the change tables in Microsoft SQL, this is exactly what it looks like. So the action that was taken, delete, insert, update, and then the timestamp that it happened. But we want to be able to capture each actual event as it comes through to get that point in time look. And then here's what it looks like. We don't have any duplication. Everything is filtered out the way that we want it to be. We have that snapshot from that point in time.
So based on your query, you can get what's happening right now, exactly at this moment. I can go to the end of the business day, previous business quarter, whatever it is, because you have full access to all the records.
Exactly.
In the change data capture one, I'm going to ask you another question here. How long does that data live?
How long does that data live?
In the change data capture tables in themselves.
That's up to you. How long do you want it to live?
So it's out there for perpetuity, effectively.
Yes.
Right. So once we have the baseline data, if we're looking at real-time reports, I don't actually need to go back to the raw unless I need a true up, right? I can just continue to read the change records as they come in, and my data and my reports are staying up to date.
The other thing to note about the batch files is that when we load those, we're not dropping your previous batch load. We're appending those. So if something changed in between week 1 and week 2, you can always hop back to that previous week and be able to evaluate what happened there. So we're keeping both the CDC data as long as you would like, as well as the batch extracts. So at some point, the CDC data would just become authoritative, right? We get enough of a picture that those batch files just kind of start to fade in significance, and you can do everything you need from that CDC table.
Yeah, so the next really important thing that kind of comes out of using the Data Hub strategy and where we're aggregating all your data sets into one place is I want to be able to look across different data sets, right? I have my core data, I have my digital data, I have my treasury data. How do I bridge those things together so that I can look at things in totality or how things relate to one another, right? That's the next major challenge we've seen.
Now keep in mind, these are sales demo environments, so these are not real world numbers. For those of you credit unions that are in the room, don't panic, this is not a real credit union. So this is a bit larger query, but what we're doing is we're looking at all the member numbers from Scimitar, looking at the accounts table, and all of the Banno users that are enrolled in Banno. There's some data cleanup that we're doing in this query where we have to prepend zeros to the beginning of the member number, just because Banno stores the whole integer, not the zeros at the front. So we had to do a little bit of data prep there in this query to get to the final point. But basically what we're doing is we're going from the OpCU Scimitar demo account v1 raw, and we're joining to the Banno operations and transactions data, looking at the login accounts where the member number is stored in the users table.
So what we're doing here is we're trying to look at what all members at my credit union have signed up for Banno and have active accounts in Banno. So this is where we're looking at two different data sets merging together so that I can get a unique result.
And then the great thing about BigQuery versus other tools, I love this, and that's why I put this screenshot up. I get my raw view, but if I click on the visualization, it creates this nice line graph. Now, as I said, this is demo information, so there's a huge disparity there. But that's a great way for data engineers to get a quick view of what's going on with their data. So the first screenshot is the raw output from that query. How many users by date were Banno users versus total. I should have put members there instead of total users, but that's my miss there. So you can kind of see that you have 17,000 members, and of those, 227 have enrolled in Banno.
Yep. The next really powerful thing that we've seen, and this is important for how we're doing a lot of the data work in Data Hub, is the ability to treat JSON as first-class data objects. In a lot of the cases, so like for our Jack Henry wires, for example, and some of our Banno history events, the table schemas are relatively simple. There's like 4 or 5 columns, nothing big in there. But one of those columns is a JSON table. And what that lets us do is it lets us put rich information in there with lots of different details on it without having to change schema. That means we don't have to modify schema. That means you as a receiver of the table don't have to keep chasing the schema drift or anything along those lines. But it does mean you need to parse that JSON out to understand what data is happening inside those. So in a lot of cases, you may be looking inside that JSON object for a specific event type or a specific value. But BigQuery allows us to do that. If you are not on BigQuery, then your mileage may vary. But for the most part, you can use this as a first-class data object, and it keeps it really simple from a platform perspective for us to manage.
This is something that I really liked about BigQuery. I've done JSON-B columns in Postgres before, and sort of navigating that path to get to the data piece within that JSON blob that I want has always been a little bit tricky, and it requires some syntax that's not quite intuitive. But one of the things I really love about Data Hub is you notice the JSON value. So the first item there, change_JSON, is the actual field that the data is stored in. And then I can use dot notation to get to the specific value that I want from that JSON. So this reduces the knowledge that you have to maintain to get what you need out of that data. So here I'm just doing a select, and then I'm filtering based on the city that these events happened in. So anything that happened in Springfield. And this is a really basic query, but it really shows the power of BigQuery. So when this is run, it will extract the city value, remove the parentheses around it, which is something that's always been annoying about querying JSON, is like it doesn't look like the rest of the data in my database. So this query gets you to that.
Go back one thing. So the other good thing is, so in this particular example where we're looking at the affected person, if the application that was providing that data added new data fields or new data elements, and this was a query that you had on a report, your report would not break.
Right.
It would not change at all. Your query doesn't change unless we were to go change city to town or something like that.
Some of the other cool things that I've discovered about BigQuery, this morning I was looking at the Banno history events to find out how many plaid connections we're making or we're connecting to a particular Banno customer. And that data is stored in the Banno history. And I was able to use the JSON values to do that, but I also discovered a really cool new feature. When you're trying to get counts from multiple values and try to show those as columns in SQL, there is the case when that you can do on each column. So case it equals this, then 0, else 1, that kind of thing. BigQuery has a count if function, and it's really cool. I wasn't able to get that into the demo today, but there are a lot of features and creature comforts that are built into BigQuery that maybe aren't in normal database engines, but just having some of those quick functions makes it a lot easier to get to the data that you want very quickly.
Right. I told you I wouldn't steal your thunder, so you can have this one.
So, what are my options? As Brad mentioned in the beginning, our goal is that we want to meet you where you're at with your data. We would prefer that you'd come use Google and use BigQuery because we love that. But we realize that you've built cloud strategies outside of Google. You've got Azure, maybe you're already running Snowflake, or you're in AWS. There are several options that we have, and we're working on more advanced features to get you your data where you're at. So the first option, we showed this in the diagram. We can send you a batch on a schedule. We can drop that into a blob storage with whatever cloud provider you're using, and you can ingest that. So if you're using Snowflake, we can drop it into your AWS S3 bucket. You can use Snowpipe to then ingest that into your current data lake that you're running with Snowflake. If you're using GCP, we can use, see, I used the right term here. We can use sharing through Analytics Hub to be able to get you that data. And then we're working on some other options. And I'd be happy to talk to you about what those other options are if you want to meet at the end of the...
Quick poll of the audience. How many of you folks use GCP today? Handful. How many of you use, you don't count. How many of you use AWS? How many of you use Azure? Finally, how many of you use Snowflake? Okay. So, really interesting. I would say, just for those of you who can't see, Azure was by far the highest, and I would say Snowflake and AWS about the same.
Yeah.
I think it's really important to talk about some of the things that your team is actively working on to make this easier for the folks that have Azure. So give them a quick update on where you're at and when we're thinking about having that available.
Yeah. So one of the things that we're working on right now with both Azure and Snowflake is pivoting a little bit with our data storage strategy. So rather, we're going to be using Iceberg to store our data, Iceberg format, and then we'll be able to share that out with Fabric or Snowflake, where we retain the data the same way that we do with Google sharing. That'll be held by us. And then you'll be able to access that using either Snowflake's private data exchange or Azure's data sharing, or Fabric's data sharing. What that means is that the data will stay with us, but you'll be able to query that, join that, do whatever you want within your project, and we cover the cost of the storage, you just pay the query expenses. So whatever compute you're using to query that data, that'll be in your project, and we'll take on the storage costs in our layer.
I would say the data can stay with us. They always have the option to egress
right. You can
and
ETL it or
and
ELT
pull it into
it.
your own data store. You always have that option.
Yep.
In terms of the batch export, just to kind of talk about that, what are our options around that? Like
yeah, great question. So the first one's the one that we're all familiar with. We could do the ODI type of thing where we're sending you a CSV file, boring. Or we could do Avro or Parquet files, and we can set that up at any sort of interval that you're comfortable with. A lot of people are like, hey, what if I get this once a day? I'm like, well, you're kind of missing the boat at Data Hub if you're only getting it once a day. We can set it up for you in an hourly batch, 4-hour batch, whatever you want. How quickly do you want that data if you're going to choose the batch option? The real power of what we're trying to build here is we want you to have this data as quick as you can so that the business folks at your organization can make the decisions that they need to right now as soon as they have that data.
Anything else?
What other questions you got for me? You're full of them.
No, I'm good.
Well, thank you all.